So before we start, I would like to only raise the hands. Who of you guys are from the product side, and who of you? Yeah, one product, two, three, okay. Few more. And the rest is from marketing? Yes, if you could raise a hand. Yeah, so we have a good mix. Nice, thank you. So I only get a short, kitchen story, I know. People talking in one of the companies I was working, oh, let's do the Scrum. It's very popular right now. It's a new way of project manager, right? So I think this kind of setup or this kind of buzzwords, Agile, Scrum, and everything around it is happening quite often, or I had an experience about that. And I think it's good to start with the basic definition of Agile, Waterfall, who everyone actually, might have an idea. Waterfall, it's a bit taking longer to get the results and see the outcomes. Agile should be more adjustable, shorter, and small results adding up in the bigger outcome. So I would like to ask you guys for the beginning, how do you define these two methods? And generally, if there is some company-driven definition, or this is really definition we should apply in our company?
Maybe I'll start because I know no formal definition. I'll just share my informal view of this. For me, Waterfall is really about knowing at the start what you want to build exactly, and then just doing it across whatever time horizon there is to execute that. And then Agile is really time boxing yourself and shipping something at the end of a certain time period, not knowing what you necessarily ship completely upfront, and then really getting the feedback from the market or from your customers, and then doing it again and again and again. That's it.
Yeah, I'll take a shot. I think this is hard to define because every company is going to do it differently. So for me, I think it comes down to how well you understand the solution. So hopefully you understand what problem you're solving as a business or the problem that you're solving for your customers. But I think the methodology of an approach to developing a product or developing a program, falling between Agile and Waterfall, has to do with how well you understand what the solution is and the risk if the solution is incorrect. So if the solution is extremely well understood and the risk is very high, if it's incorrect, and let's say an example might be a rocket, where teams of NASA scientists will work on one very small component for 8 years, multi-billion-dollar contracts, and if it's wrong, well, it's really bad and it's millions or billions of dollars down the drain. That's where Waterfall is very important. But for instance, at a technology company where the solution is often not very well understood, and oftentimes the solution changes, specifically within the business that I work at, having sort of an iterative approach, a team that develops expertise of understanding the problem and gets better and better at refining the solution, or an Agile approach, is how I think of Agile.
Yeah, I think Andrius and Patrick already covered pretty much everything, but just a different lens to what they both stated. Waterfall is very, very plan-based. So I think Andrius was talking about this, which is you know exactly what the solution is. The risk appetite at the end of launching the product is really, really low. You have very clear understanding of the dependencies that you have to work through. And therefore, the end product that you're going to see is known months in advance. Versus Agile, very little understanding of what the outcome is going to be. But I think to Patrick's point, the appetite to take the risk of the outcome not being what you anticipate it to be is generally very, very high. And so therefore, you work through it very, very quickly. So I think it's long versus short, but low appetite to risk in Waterfall versus high appetite to risk in Agile.
Yeah, I think just to expand, it also has to do with the payback of getting the problem solved effectively. If the payback is not that high, then you probably want an Agile approach so that you can very quickly get to the point of decision of whether or not you truly want to invest in this thing. And an example might be adding a new button to your shopping cart. If the payback is extremely high, if this is like a world problem that no one has solved, and I think for this space, like marketing attribution, if there was a product that could tell you exactly the effectiveness of every single one of your dollars, which doesn't exist, how valuable would that be to your business? That's where it might be beneficial taking a waterfall approach if you have a very strong sort of opinion as to what the solution looks like, because the payback in terms of getting the problem solved is so high.
So going away a little from the longer introduction of the theory, how do you work? Are you Agile?
Oh my God. Oh my God. Is that even possible? I doubt it. I think, Eva, to your point, for over a decade, I was in consulting. So I've had the chance to see how different companies, to name a few, like Google, Levi's, of course, Walmart at the moment, some others like Gap. So I've had the chance to see how they do things. And what was so fascinating was not just how different companies do the same thing, tends to be very, very different, but even different teams within the same company could look extremely different. To give one simple example, if I really think about the team at Walmart, for example, and their goal is to optimize customers who land on their item page to add to cart more, there's a very high possibility for us to organize that team to be very small, nimble, highly independent of any other team, and that works really well from an agile standpoint. However, another team at Walmart, which might be more omni-channel feature focused, so an example would be buy online, pick up in store, that tends to require a bridge between the online and the offline teams, and heavy dependency on teams like operations, where you have to make sure the store associates are well trained on the launches before you can actually even get that customer facing. And those teams, like I can't stress enough, the ability to be truly agile, it just sounds good on paper, but very, very hard to achieve. And I've seen examples of this in retail, but outside of retail in other industries as well. So I don't know how Booking.com
So
or
may I
Lyft are
challenge
doing it.
you, saying it's more the buzzword, that possibility to really work like that?
You mean like whether agile is a buzzword? I think so. I think it has just gotten a lot of fan following because of the attention it has gotten. But in reality, it really boils down to what goal are you trying to solve and what constraints you have to operate within. And many times that does not allow you to be agile, at least from my experience.
I actually like how candid is Mamta about what's happening in other companies and the companies she was involved. I think everyone, most of the time, say that they're agile, but in reality, at least in my experience in all the companies I work for, it's a mix. Like there's element of agile, there's element of waterfall as well. So there are projects that take longer time, that have clarity on what needs to be built, a lot less ambiguity, that usually has a lot more waterfall inside. Even if the team says that they work agile, agile is more of a tool than to split work in sprints, but still nothing gets shipped after every sprint for a while, and then after a couple of months, release happens. People realize that, hey, we actually knew that solution, but that solution is not the right solution. The cost is there, and not a very good result in that. And even the most agile teams that it works with still have issues. If you look inside the agile team, you can find the mini waterfall, because you can find, let's say, front-end engineers slacking for the first week because backend is not ready. And then they're working on the second week, and then they realize, hey, something is actually missing on the backend side. So the ping pong starts. There's a play in a way. And the best teams that where I saw probably the best application of Agile are the teams that are moving together in parallel all the time. So they find a way for everyone to move fast, to build that product and to have a product ready almost every day. And then at the end of the cycle, at the end of the week, or at the end of the 2 weeks, there's something actually shippable to the customer, something that can get a feedback from the market. But even then, if you ship at the end of the 2 weeks, the response is not immediate. Maybe you're running an A/B test or something. So what do you do for the next 2 weeks? That gives you kind of back to the waterfall again, and so on. So it's a mix in that. I think everyone works in a mixed environment. That's my take.
Yeah, I think it also comes down to constraints of what type of investment you have in terms of people, what your timelines are. Anecdotally, a couple of experiences. A startup that I was working at had two years of runway, effectively, and we didn't really have a product. And so that wasn't really an iterative approach. We had a hypothesis, and to evaluate the hypothesis, we needed to get something in front of customers, and that had to be built. And we had to go from 0 to 1, and we were very prescriptive about what we wanted to build. And that was not really agile or iterative at all. That was just heads down, shipping software, getting to the point where we can deliver something that someone's going to pay some money for. But then when you go from 1 to 10 or 10 to 1,000, let's say as a business, it becomes much more iterative, and then you start refactoring and doing things differently. And so I think a lot of it comes down to like how much investment you truly have, like what your timelines are, and then again what the risk is of getting it wrong. And when the risk of getting it wrong, in the case of the startup was, well, the startup goes out of business and everyone loses their jobs. The timeline being one of the factors here caused us to just move as quickly as we could against sort of a very prescribed plan. So, to Mamta's point, a lot of it comes down to the team, the constraints of the business, the constraints of the resourcing to decide how you actually ship the thing that you want to ship.
I actually want to use your terminology of the appetite for risk. I was talking about Agile and Waterfall to some of my colleagues, and someone asked me, imagine if we tried to apply Agile to medical devices, specifically devices that are used on a surgical table. Can we really afford to get that wrong when it's being used for the first time truly in front of customers? Like, that is a risk no one really wants to take. So I think just teeing off of what you were just saying, really kind of applying that thinking is the responsible thing to do, in my opinion.
Yeah, so maybe shortly add to that from my personal experience as well. I had already talking to people, and some of them are requiring some couches to the teams and so on. I want to get Agile because it's a buzzword, and they realize, oh, we are a production company actually that's really doing Agile in the topics of procurement and buying parts of the components of the machine we're producing, like for example the medical one or something else. It's not really so possible to make it so Agile. Yes, of course you can make some small elements of the software of the machine itself, but kind of the overall projects will be kind of waterfall or define it in the small parts and pieces, but definitely will not get there. But from that, what I heard from you guys, I would say, you correct me if I'm wrong, you all tend to say there is depending really on the setup, on the team, on structure. So we quite often have a mix of like kind of hybrid model. Would you agree with that? That it's not really, it's really hard to have team or company where there is Agile working quite well, quite often depending on the team structure or the goals, is a mix of both. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I think it always comes down to the humans on the team. And specifically, I say human in terms of every distinct combination of people that you put in a room together is going to have a different dynamic of working together to produce a product. And the way that they work together optimally will change. If you add another person and another person, new cross-functional stakeholders, it's always going to change. And so I think the most important piece is to just understand the problem that you're approaching, and the team will sort of build their own process over time based on things like sensitivity to risk, the resourcing, et cetera. I think when someone says, I need Agile, hey, I think we need Agile, to me, my response in my head is, well, I don't think you understand what problem you're trying to solve. And in the marketing sort of domain, it's like, well, we need an SEO consultant or a social media consultant. It's like someone thinks that they're going to solve this problem they don't really fully understand with this other thing as a way to sort of like project some of that accountability. And it really, I think it generally comes down to, we don't really understand what problem we're trying to solve, so I think we're going to solve it with process, which is not the right way to approach building things.
I think my previous point was exactly what you're saying. Like, it's in my experience, it's hybrid. Like, although I have to add, like, I'm personally a big believer of Agile and the way of working. And I think what Patrick said is that it's really about the humans. It's really about the people and their preferences. And I think one of the things that we humans have is insecurity and uncertainty. really we hate uncertainty in general. And one of the negative part about Agile, and one of the kind of big areas that I think Agile is associated with, is uncertainty. And I think a lot of people are not really comfortable in Agile environments because of that. I think there's a lot of work done in terms of how to increase that certainty and so on. But we have to admit that not everyone will be happy about it. So that, I think, is a big driver behind that hybrid approach. Because I could very much argue that for a smaller company, when they're running out of money and so on, Agile is actually a better way than Waterfall. They will work faster, they're likely to be more in touch with the market, and so on. But when you're running out of money, your insecurity is at the highest point. So you really want more certainty, your investors want more certainty, and so on. And that creates that pressure to do more of the Waterfall style. That, I think, is a big factor.
So the size of the company and the processes inside played a role as well. So as we're having as well a mixed audience here, how does it apply not only on the product side, but marketing teams? How was your experience? Does marketing teams apply Agile as well, or work with products together on that? How was your experience on this?
Yeah, I have a personal bias here. I think it's gotten so cheap to launch marketing campaigns or strategies and the variance in a successful campaign or approach positioning from a product marketing perspective, the variance in what success looks like is so wide, as in you don't often just get it a little right or a little wrong. You either get it completely wrong because you don't understand the customer, or you just blow it out of proportion. Some examples might be Patagonia, the Colin Kaepernick sort of campaigns for Nike. And if you talk to those people, a lot of this comes down to sort of a very iterative approach wherein they're testing different messaging strategies with subsegments of people, and then finally they launch something from what really inherently is a very agile approach. And so for me, specifically within my role and my background, I work with agile marketing teams who have very tight sprint cycles, very clearly defined goals, and they're iterating on their messaging strategies until something sticks. And the big platforms that we use for marketing today are really good at identifying the things that resonate with groups of people.
What's your?
Yeah, my personal experience working with marketing has been, predominantly in context of large transformational programs being run by massive companies. So to give an example would be at Apple, we were trying to expand, or we were aiming to expand their buy online, pick up in store to 9 new countries. So it was a very, milestone-based program, very clear PR milestone attached to that launch itself. And so in scenarios such as this, when I worked with marketing, I'm not sure of whether it was due to lack of the right processes or due to the nature of the program that we were running, we noticed that it was not as heavily agile as I think Patrick, you're describing, and it was also primarily because they were using a mix of marketing channels between the digital channels as well as the traditional, I would say, media. PR, TV, along with your digital marketing. So I'm unclear on what the opportunities may exist for those traditional forms of marketing channels just because of my lack of understanding. But just from having interacted with them, I didn't quite see them operate in the agile format that Patrick was describing. But it's encouraging to know that it can be done. So I'll surely take that back to any marketing partners I work with in the future.
In my experience, I think what was interesting is that in one of my previous companies, we had performance marketers and product people and engineers in the growth team working together. And they were working together on agile manner, where product change was done in the 2-week cycle, as well as the marketing campaign initiative aligned with that would be created in that 2-week cycle, and then both of them would be tested together as the one kind of continuous user journey. I think from there, some of agile practices actually moved to marketing in that company, and seemed to be useful inside that team. What I observed later, I think that similar projects kind of look similarly, like in terms of whether it's Agile or Waterfall. If we take an example of branding in marketing, like or rebranding activity, never seen it done on an Agile way. Like it's like a 9-month project or a 6-month project and so on. Like, but it's actually very similar to when you think about it in product or engineering. Projects we encounter sometimes are replatforming projects. Like, so we go from one platform to another. It's very complicated. There's a lot of dependencies, long project, and so on. Like, so again, 6 to 9 months, Waterfall. Like, but if you are working on something that is iterative in nature, something that you launch every week and so on, like that is probably a good fit to try Agile practices, to try sprints, and so on. Like, as well as on the operational side, like Kanban as a way of doing things. Maybe it's not exactly, everyone would agree that this is Agile or anything, like, but this is something that was not even born in tech, like in any sense, like, and this is something that is being used in support and in other parts of the companies that it works for.
Yeah, I think to Andrius's point on the topic of like organizational constraints, I think getting that right in terms of reducing dependencies between teams. If this team is solving this specific problem, the more hops they have to develop the solution, the more likely it's probably going to look or feel very Waterfall-esque, because they have to generate, some request to legal, and it has to go through marketing, then it has to go back through creative, and then data engineering needs to get involved. And the more that organizations structure teams to be sort of self-managing and end-to-end solve their own problems, the more those teams can be agile. So oftentimes, like, agile isn't necessarily a solution. The solution to being more agile, if that's what you're trying to accomplish, is to organize teams in the right way, like the marketing, performance marketing person with the engineer, the scientist, et cetera, so that they can kind of unblock themselves and self-manage. And most organizations, I don't think, do that very effectively.
Yeah, I think we were discussing just now, like an hour ago, about how different type kind of organizations have like potentially Agile inside the teams. The organization itself is Waterfall, like, because you can have like a back-end team operating in an Agile manner, or marketing team operating in an Agile manner, and then front-end team Agile again, like. But then, like, as a company, it's still Waterfall, because like the front end is waiting for the back end, marketing is waiting for the front end. Any delay actually delays their plans and so on. Like, so it's organizational design first, and then whatever happens in the teams is probably second. That's how I would sum what you just said.
Yeah, so maybe share as well a little my experience. I really realized that ongoingly operational topics related to the department function, chapters, call it as you want, on the frameworks, basically that's really easy to set it up this agile way, because you, as you said, optimizing campaign, optimizing small improvements on the product, and on kind of like technical depth from the back end, front end, and so on. So it's independent, it's small, it's involve less people. If it's a bigger topic, if related to OKRs, some goals with the company has, or is this a project, I don't know, Black Friday campaign, which involves a lot of partners, a lot of external resources and stuff like that, it's becoming Waterfall because of the complexity. And that's kind of, I observe it as well quite often. So what I recommend always as well, that people should divide kind of their resources in terms of time, and saying, okay, my part of the Agile, let's say ongoingly business, it's one part, and I don't know, 50, 70, depending which task you have in the team, and see that if you plan the teams, how to divide it. Speaking about that, maybe some of you are like in front of the stage, kind of like thinking about restructuring, changing. What is your experience or advice, what the people should take with them, planning, thinking about maybe cross-functional, Spotify model, the whole area, Agile, and so on. If you have something in mind you would like to share.
Maybe I'll start with sharing one tip in terms of designing organization for that, like, and I'll probably steal that idea from Patrick, which is really about dependencies, like. A good signal whether your company is ready to go on Agile and like try these practices is how many dependencies there are from between teams. If there are a lot of dependencies, like, this is never going to work. Like, Then you should look, okay, what are these dependencies? How can you get people together to work in teams that are working on the same goal, same cycles, and so on? Then this can actually be successful. So that's one thing that I would really stress and share.
Yeah, I think organizing teams around problems. So as an example, many marketing organizations will have a creative team that produces creative assets. And oftentimes these teams, just by nature of the people they can hire, are kind of organized as an internal agency. They've got a ticketing system, they intake requests, they kind of go through the request log. And it's no issue with the individuals, but they're completely divorced from the problem that they're actually solving with the assets. Like, what feeling do you want to invoke and why, as opposed to produce this ad to do this. And so I've seen, like, whenever teams are empowered to understand the problems they're solving, both from an organizational, like, psychological safety perspective, and from a training and expectation setting perspective, then it doesn't matter, Agile, Waterfall, you're going to have a high-performing team. And it's good to point out when teams are unable to understand their problems or they have too many dependencies that they can't handle their own solutions.
Yeah, so I wanted to take a little bit of a detour before I actually answer, Eva, your question. I know we've spent a lot of time, grounding ourselves on the realities and really talking about, even though we want Agile to work, why it doesn't work because of a lot of constraints. But I think to Andrius, your point earlier, I'm a big fan of Agile. And personally, I apply Agile in my personal life also all the time. Like, give you a simple example. You want to cut sushi, your regular knife is not going to work. But the way I approach it, I will use a regular knife, figure out what's really not working, form some hypothesis, go to the store, pick the next best option based off of...
Are you building hypothesis on sushi? I don't believe you.
I'm telling you, we've tried this. I'll just go pick up another knife and, use it. And if it doesn't work, then I'll go back and pick another one and come back and do this. And by the way, my husband hates this about me, but I do it all the time in my personal life. So I guess the point was, I think there's a lot of power in Agile, but the reality is that there are a lot of things that prevent us from being able to actually deploy that in reality. So I guess coming back to your question, Eva, I would say start small and see portions of the big picture where you can actually apply Agile and see if you can work your way upwards to make bigger and bigger portions of your program or teams or organization Agile. And I think there's a lot of power in that.
I think maybe one additional point where I think it's important to expand on what Patrick said. I think he stressed the point of psychological safety, right, inside the teams. I think there's another element of psychological safety, which is in parts of the organization that are not going on Agile train at that point of time, if you're doing that, as well as the psychological safety of your, executive team as well. Because if that is not solved, then the whole thing about unpredictability is likely to derail the Agile adoption as well, because the moment the insecurity will kick in, people will start asking for clear, specific deadlines, clear outcomes coming in at certain points of time, even if they are not necessary. So ensuring that support and understanding from other parts of the organization that might be dependent on you, as well as the leadership of the company, is crucial.
So I would definitely say in our company, we just recently, after 4 or 5 months, make the change as well in cross-functional team. We had before, really, as a giving example, we have a backend tool for editors who write the offers we're having on the website from travel, and as well in front-end part, and we had this term separately. And generally, that was exactly the challenge, that the teams were following or waiting on each other because one had sprints on 4 weeks, another in 2, and so on. So there was always bottlenecks on time, and always were losing the time on particular delivery of features. And now we even extended more with, as you suggested, having the trial of the one team working cross-functional, including even marketing. And what I would advise, definitely communicate widely, repeatedly, the change what, why, and how, because even if we did it few times, it's really hard to make the switch in the head. Okay, I'm marketing. Why I should have now in week with product and tech guys every week and discuss the goal we're going to reach? I like losing the time here. I have my campaigns to do, or other way around as well from product. I have customers to interview. So kind of like this change in the mind, we work in cross-functional teams, even if it's communicated, should be communicated widely and frequently, because this is a change of way how people working. But already after the test and now we see really that the team is becoming a team, cross-functional team, and they're working together. There are challenges. There's, of course, different mindset, different cultures, but definitely it saved the time through writing 10,000 messages on Skype or Slack and not finding the solution, this short meeting and going to the one goal. I definitely, but communicate it widely and repeatedly, because if you're planning to implement this cross-functional Agile framework, it's not like fit for every company, not every stage, and needs time. So I think for our side, from the discussion, we are for now done. The question is there some questions to ask from you as the audience? So we are open for that. I don't know if we're having Slido or...
There's this expression, if you don't know where you're going, any road will get you there. And I see that really applied to Agile a lot, because I guess the question would be, how do you determine whether you're really making progress in an Agile environment vis-a-vis scrambling around and fixing many problems? That's a management challenge, or a team leader challenge, to make those kind of progressive determinations, decisions. And that's one of the weaknesses of Agile that is not done right.
I think you touched a very good point. And in this particular case, is the question what it is that is required to be the direction of where you're going, because that thing could be a clear problem that you're trying to solve, or that thing could be a very clear product that you're trying to build, right? And think quite often this is perceived that, hey, you need to have a very clear product in mind. And that is kind of the way to progress. The problem with that is that product may not be the solution for whatever the problem you're trying to solve, or that product might be a product looking for a solution, right? So problem is actually, I believe, more important than the product itself, right? And then for every problem, I think you can find ways to have a compass in place. How do you measure your progress towards solving that problem? And then you could iterate with different solutions. But the people who actually have that problem, and continuous feedback from these people to ensure that you're actually going to the right way. So that direction could be the problem, not the solution itself.
Yeah, I think to Andrius' point, it comes down to metrics. There's a metric to measure progress for anything, even when you don't know where you're going. To use an example for one of our teams, we don't know if a certain sort of marketing program that we're trying to evaluate and build is going to work, but we do know that running experiments is how we get there. And so one of the goals is just how many experiments we run, right? And then eventually over time, you gather data and you learn more about what specific problem you're trying to solve and what the metrics are that allow you to understand if you're achieving the right solution. And then you refine your metrics, and it might just be, okay, well, not the number of experiments, but the percentage of experiments that win, and maybe the percentage of experiments that have this sort of outcome. And so I think it comes down to what you're measuring, and I think a failing strategy is to not have anything be measured from the get-go.
Maybe what I would quickly add, I think it's important in at least some situations to have a clear vision in place as well. So some sort of solution, some direction of solution could be there. But the art here is how you remain ambiguous enough, but at the same time giving people that direction forward. And this could be kind of a state of mind, a state of situation, state of society towards that you're heading right now. Like, I really liked what I think Airbnb did at a certain point, like where they described their vision without actually stating the specific product. Like, but they essentially describe the user journey, the eventual user journey that they want to create. Like, so that is something in between where you're not very specific. So you don't have like a spec at the start and then try to execute that through the waterfall, where you give freedom for the team to find solutions along the way. Like, because some direction is useful. Like, we humans, we need something tangible. Like,
what we, for example, are doing, of course, on the C-level and us as a middle management as well, kind of, we did last year. Of course, we are a smaller company, so it probably will not be applicable for you guys, but we really, from the setting up the OKRs and the goals, we have narrow, let's say, from 30 strategic objectives, ideas we had to 5 or 6 together, but it was really a mix of all management. We were like 20 people on the workshop on brainstorming and discussing, and that's helped us really to narrow and challenge each other against not only, let's say, product and IT people separate from the others, really like mix of even with finance and accounting, so support processes in the company. So that was kind of like already direction narrowing from us. And then in the teams, as you mentioned, it's the same. Like there was a suggestions on 2-3 directions, which kind of like contradict each other. And then team decide, we leave really authority, like the team decide themselves, okay, the first cycle of OKRs, we do it this 3 as a trial and see if that's gonna drive us to the goal which they get from the management. So kind of that brings as well satisfaction in the teams, because they can decide a bit more than only given it's from product manager or from someone above or someone else kind of exactly details. They can decide, and if they only have the explanation why and interview as well the customers that it's the needed solution. So that's how we solve it.
Okay, we have actually a bunch of questions for you guys that are all queued up. So I think that you touched on this, Eva, about using both Agile and Waterfall for product. So somebody is asking, should you be using both in general in companies based on your situation? And maybe other folks can chime in on this as well on the panel if you'd like.
I can start. I would say absolutely, and I think we alluded to this a little bit, through our conversation. The key is to start with understanding of the problem that you're trying to solve, both for the customer and from a business goal standpoint, and then what the constraints are that you have to operate within, and then make a decision on, does Agile work the best, or is it Waterfall, or is it a hybrid? Because the reality is that there isn't a one-size-fits-all that can work for all companies and all teams. So I would surely suggest kind of like starting from the problem and then like working backwards on the how you're going to solve it. In my experience, has worked the best.
Okay.
So maybe I add to that as a tangible example, which I shortly mentioned before. Having teams working with customers outside who are on our app on website. Of course, they want to implement in front end quick, some small features that satisfy and improve the wishes of customers, right? The content we are putting on our website is driven by customers' system as CMS, and that's our editors who write the system. So basically, to implement changes there, how they put the contents, add additional fields and structure. From the technical point of view, it's not a big issue. It's changing in the database, adding additional field and so on. But from training people who are in the content, which are in different countries, like 50 people, to get this field working on, it's taking more time. So it's not possible to do it so agile and quick and like adding extra button in the front end for normal user and maybe had additional explanation to them, oh, now you can add it or something to your account. So that's why, that's confirming what you're saying, it depends. So that's kind of like tangible, maybe example to it.
And I think we also were talking about in the green room another example I'm sure all of you have experienced. So think about spin, for example. Their app, is a classic example of where Agile potentially works the best. However, if you're thinking about deploying the actual scoots in the city, there is a heavy investment of manufacturing those. So the applicability of Agile working in that scenario is going to be likely much lesser because you have to put in an upfront cost of manufacturing those scoots and actually deploying them in the cities. So just another very real-life example of where Agile works better versus where hybrid or Waterfall might work better.
Yeah, and to follow up on that question, this is interesting. So somebody said, quote, if you don't know where you're going, any road will get you there. Oh, we already asked that. Oh, okay, all right. I was late to the party. I'm really sorry, guys. Okay. It's an interesting question. Okay, are there any tools or best practices you recommend to increase the adoption of Waterfall or Agile in your projects? Any tools? Assuming that the team is not using any of them yet.
I mean, Google Sheets. No, not joking. Like Google Sheets. So one of the requirements here needs to be what's the training time or the sort of ramp up time for someone to accommodate some new tool. And so you've got Jira and Confluence and these systems that are designed for very specifically delivering software projects. And you've got Trello, which is task management. But I consistently go back to Google Sheets when it's a new team or a team's been sort of reformatted because it's the one tool that everyone knows how to use, and it is so customizable to what you're trying to accomplish.
I would maybe add, yes, I agree on that. What we actually using additionally for product management, ideas management and prioritization is a ProdPad, because it's kind of like a bit far away from this technical Jira, which scares a bit other departments sometimes. So that's kind of like to divide the discovery and delivery in the whole process. What I've seen as well from people I'm talking around and industry, Airtable gets quite popular because it's like kind of enhanced way of Google Sheets and as well quite easy to applicable, but have more functionalities in case you might need them.
Still remember Excels with the waterfall. Sorry? I still remember Excel files with the waterfall.
Oh yeah.
Nothing changed. Now it's Google Sheets, right?
Google Sheets.
Yeah, there's more features, so I agree with you, Google Sheets all the way. Okay, if you're going to use Agile, what's the most important rules or set of rules do you think should be followed? So if folks are using it, what should they be?
The team should fully understand the problem they're solving, and the team should be opted in to using Agile as their sort of development or management practice. I think if you read the blogs by Agile coaches or read the Agile manifesto, understand the problem, self-managing team, but really the team has to kind of be opted in, because if it's a team that's sort of unfamiliar with that kind of transformation, there's a bit of a J-curve here. A J-curve being the y-axis is just general happiness and comfort in their job, and it always kind of goes down in the near term. X-axis is time, but then it will sort of spike back up. And if the team isn't opted in, you'll get a lot of people that sort of opt out passively, which in turn sort of makes the team underperform.
You guys anybody have anything else to add before we move on to our final question?
What causes people to actually opt out of Agile mindset?
If it requires them to think or produce work in a way that they're uncomfortable with. So as an example, we have teams that work on improving models, let's say models to predict things. And there are very specific ways that the people that kind of are deep into that type of work like to do their work. And when you try to break that up to make sort of iterative improvements as opposed to sort of big, sort of maybe waterfall improvements, they might sort of very passively say, no, this isn't how I do work. And if they're not opted in, then they're just going to kind of slowly, passively opt out, and you'll see it in the work product of the team.